Good afternoon, Madam President, various Vice Presidents, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. A common question I've received growing up has been, where are you from? And it's a fair question considering I look like this, but will occasionally break out into Singlish depending on whom I'm speaking to. And I used to give a very long-winded reply that I was born in the US to a Swiss father, a Singaporean mother, just happened to be working and studying there. Never really lived in the US, but somehow was dragged around the world due to my father's job as a pastry chef. And somehow eventually landed up here in Singapore. But I found that would take up too much time and I would bore my audience at that point. And as I grew older, I realized that the more simpler and obvious answer was to just simply say that I'm Singaporean. And that if you draw blood from me, out will stream red, white, 5 stars and a crescent moon. And that made the most sense to me because most of my milestones have been spent and achieved here in Singapore. I've studied here, worked here, built the longest lasting relationships here. I've even served national service and I'm a commissioned officer of the Singapore Armed Forces. So I'm already pledged my allegiance to Singapore and to defending it in times of need. But growing up looking like this did invite a lot of names, if you will. Children tend to be the most vicious and without filters, and perhaps the one that has stuck the most and is the very title of my speech today was given to me sometime in secondary school, and this is a core memory of mine where during a camping trip the camp facilitator made the most astute observation, wherein that since I have an Ang Mo father and a Singaporean mother, then I must irrefutably be a half Mo. Which, up to this point, my friends had just called me Ang Mo, for lack of a better term. But it was such a grand epiphany to our teenage brains that it just stuck around through schooling and through my military service. For those of you unfamiliar, Ang Mo is it's a colloquial term to describe white people here in Singapore. It means red hair, but I actually sometimes question the origins because I cannot imagine that the early European traders were a battalion of gingers, but I digress. Now, I didn't always aspire to be a sanctions compliance officer. I think most of us never really aspire to be in banking from a young age, and we just generally fall into it. And that was kind of the case for me because I initially wanted to be a clinical psychologist, someone who, and I still am very much fascinated with the human mind, how it works, what makes us tick, and how to motivate and challenge behaviors. And so after seeing the mountain of reports, research papers, and textbooks I had to work on, I realized the psychological limits of my own capacity to study. And so I pivoted into this role where I just fell into it. It just popped up. I thought, why not give it a shot? What's the worst that could happen? And 14 years later, I'm still doing that compliance role. But then again, it's not really different, right? Psychology and compliance, wherein I still work with people, I still learn their motivations, what makes them tick, the rationale for their decisions, and how we find solutions going forward. Often when people ask, what do I do for a living? I like to say that I'm responsible for deciding who the bank becomes friends with. And given the amount of bad actors in this world, if I can do anything to make their lives as difficult as possible, then I'm all for it. Now, while my professional life might seem smooth and stable, the same can be said for my own personal life. I don't mean it in a bad way, but my wife and I, we are currently living our lives on what gamers like to call hard mode. You see, I've got 2 young boys, aged 4 and 2, and I've got 2 Samoyeds, 2 pets, aged 13 and 3. And what color am I?
No.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. No, I thought.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Yeah, apologies for that. And so, for all of you who are not familiar with Samoyeds, They're essentially sentient balls of fur, of white fur, that cannot stop moving. And I would like to describe my sons in the very same way, albeit without the fur. And for most people, right, when we come to Friday, they will usually say, "Thank God it's Friday." Not me, right? I am the exact opposite. In fact, weekends are things that I dread, because I have an existential challenge wherein for the next 48 hours, how do I meaningfully keep my children entertained whilst keeping them alive and not strangling them to death? Right? I know this is a little pessimistic, but I mean, this is something that my wife and I currently feel. And I feel that if most parents are more honest about it, then, you know, we can, things would be a little bit better. But in fairness, I'm cautiously optimistic that, you know, as the children grow up, things will be better and improve over time. And so this is a little bit about me, a Halfmore, a formerly aspiring psychologist, a defender of the bank's friendships, and a man just living weekend to weekend on hard mode. I liked what Annie mentioned about the perfect goodbyes, and I think it's quite fitting that Roy has the privilege of assessing me for my first icebreaker, and I guess my privilege as well, to receive your evaluation. And I can't think of a better way than to receive that as a perfect goodbye, at least from my respect and from my perspective. I haven't known you, I've only met you twice, but I'm grateful that at least my first evaluation will come from you in this form of a goodbye. I wanted to join the Toastmasters because I've heard about you guys for decades, and I never took the leap of faith to try and do it, because I wanted to figure out, okay, my job requires engagement with people, and I want to be able to do that in a meaningful and impactful manner. And so I look forward to hearing all of your stories in due course and learning from you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as is tradition for icebreakers, I request everyone to stand up and applaud Curtis and embarking on his journey. Congratulations, Curtis. Before we invite our third speaker, we also have another guest